the question, who is the greatest college basketball coach in men's D1 history, most people, without debate, without quarrel, would say it is the Wizard of Westwood, John Wooden. And that would be a pretty safe bet to say he was the GOAT of men's D1 basketball, given the fact he is the only one to have led his team to 10 national championships, a record that may stand forever in this time period we're living in with college basketball. And that would be a safe bet. He was an incredible coach and an even better human being. However, if we were to rewind and include women's basketball, and then ask the same question given the same credentials, who is the all-time greatest basketball coach in women's and men's D1 history, then Wooden might have a competitor in Coach Geno Auriemma, coach of the Connecticut Huskies women's basketball team. Coach Auriemma, earlier this month, led his girls to a whopping 12th national title. And if you really get in the weeds, what he's done has been absolutely miraculous. Of those 12 national titles, 6, half of them, came through perfect seasons. I mean, it's one thing to say you were never beaten, but to say 6 different times you were never beaten in a year is remarkable. Beyond those 12 national titles, Geno has also led 2 different women's teams to gold medals. As of today, he has an 88% winning percentage, which means of 10 games he walks on the court, he's going to beat you 9 out of 10. It is absolutely remarkable. When you add men's Connecticut basketball, in the last 30 years, Connecticut has won 17 out of 30 years national championships. That's roughly 60% of the time, either a men or a women's Connecticut team will have won a national title in the last 30 years. But this wasn't always this way for Coach Geno. He came to Connecticut as the coach in 1985, and by one vote became the women's basketball coach. Partly because back then it was frowned upon. It was a decrease of a job for a male to be coaching women. It was seen as you couldn't cut it in a male sport. Coach Geno was the only male applicant of the scores of women who wanted to land that job. And the number one nominee wasn't Geno. The number one nominee for that job was the front runner, was a very accomplished women's coach by the name of Chris Daly. She was getting ready to be offered the head coach job, and Geno had his final interview, and by one vote, the committee chose Geno over Chris Daly to become the coach of an organization and a school that had only one winning season in their entire history. And so he had a shoestring budget in 1985. His first decision was to hire his assistant, and Coach Geno hired the woman he beat out of. He hired Chris Daly, and she has been with him ever since. For the last 40 years, they have been coach and assistant coach. Coach Daly simply to her girls simply goes by CD. And both Coach Gino and Coach Daly have built a powerhouse. The first 10 years was brutal. They ate humble pie after humble pie within the Big East. They were manhandled by teams back then, such as Tennessee. I notice Dick is not here today when I say that. And Notre Dame and Stanford. And finally, in 1995, Coach Gino and the women UConn won their first of what would be 12 national championships. I am taking a master class now with Coach Gino on leadership. It's quite compelling, and Coach Gino says that he decided, even though the game of basketball has changed, everything about it has changed. Budget has changed, recruiting has changed, the players have changed. Everything about it has changed. He said, but there's one thing that Coach Daly and I have never changed. We started on day one. We made a commitment that we would sink or swim together, and we have never changed, and that is the secret of our success. And he said that whatever player we selected, the 12, the 16 women roster, we would, with those 16 ladies, pour everything into them. We wouldn't talk so much about building a system. You hear coaches say that, well, I'm building a system. We wouldn't talk about building a system. We wouldn't talk about building an organization. We would simply pour ourselves, our mind, our will, our emotions in every young lady. And we believe that is the best recruiting tool we have. So that when those ladies excel, because we've poured ourselves into them after 4 years, they will then go by the virtue of their life and how they performed on the court, they will promote the school 10 times better than I could at a recruiting meeting. And there is a secret as to why UConn out-recruits every other school every year. There is a reason why in the WNBA, those that have led their teams to titles are generally former UConn girls. When you think of the name Sue Bird, who arguably is the greatest WNBA player in terms of her stats, out of Connecticut, and on we go. Rachel Lobo, and on we go. These are UConn girls. And it all started with one dream: we would invest in one person at a time, turn them loose for them to go and promote the cause of Connecticut. Now, I want you to have that in your mind as I give you another scenario. We'll call it Plan B. And I want you to think of your life and the life that we all live today in the world we live, and the amount of decisions that come into our lives every day. Decisions that your grandparents didn't have to make, but you do. For example, let me just pick a very mundane thing that happens to us every day of our life that we've got to make a choice about. You can go home in just a few moments and you can fix your lunch at your house. And if you want your sandwich warmed up, you don't have to start a fire. You don't have to wait. You can just put it in an electric box called a microwave and nuke it. If you want popcorn, you put it in for 2 minutes and 8 seconds and you pop that thing. And you can then make a decision. At 1:47, when you hear all the kernels stop popping, you can actually stop the time and take it out. If you don't like the brand of microwave you have, guess what? You can go buy a GE, you can go buy a Maytag, you can go buy a Kenmore, you can go buy a Nakamichi and hope that it doesn't break after 2 years. The list is endless. You can get it in white. If you don't like white, you can buy it in red, black, stainless steel. You can hook it and bolt it to your cabinets, or you can put it on your countertop. You can buy one with a turntable or without. You can have certain wattage. You can go to Sears, Walmart, Best Buy, or order it online from Amazon. The choice is yours. The point is, we all have endless choices to make every day. Think of the opportunities that we have just with jobs and different extracurricular involvement that our grandparents never even thought of. Chances are, if you want it, it's available. Think of the information that we have in this little device that I can scroll for 1 hour and in 1 hour get data dump after data dump, more information than our forebears in the 18th century received in a lifetime. I can get in 1 hour all across the world. So, with all of these decisions and all of these opportunities and all of this information that no other generation has had, why is it that more people are unhappy and more people are depressed and more people have anxiety problems? I mean, we have more therapists than we've ever had. We have more medicine than we've ever had. I mean, for Pete's sake, you can get online and say, here's 12 steps to make sure you're not anxious, and you can read it. And yet, we're still anxious. So the Church of Jesus Christ has a choice to make. And the choice that most churches make is they've tried to keep up with this culture of thousands of decisions, thousands of opportunities, and thousands of information. And so the church of our country, in particular, has become what I call God-mart. That we become all things to all men. If you want yoga on Tuesday mornings, we'll provide it. If you want a Bible study on Haggai in Portuguese, we'll provide it. If you want Clowns for Christ, we'll provide it. This is how mega churches stay in business. And they provide everything they can possible to everybody to make sure everybody's okay. And that's all well and good until you don't provide it anymore. And so then we're now treating churchgoers like a consumer at Walmart. So that if Walmart doesn't have the particular olive oil I want, no harm, no foul, I just go to Target. This is how Americans view worship now. If this particular church doesn't have the brand I want, no harm, no foul, I just leave it and go down the street to another church until they don't have what I want, and on we go. And there is a reason why our churches of our country today have more information, more access, more stuff, and yet people are abandoning the church at a highest rate than we've ever seen in the history of Christianity. The lack of commitment to the church is staggering. We are, for the first time, if we believe statistical information, for the first time underneath water of the amount of Americans who don't attend a church regularly to those who do. And so it can't be the lack of information that's the problem, the lack of opportunities. Might I suggest that Coach Gino's method may actually be more in line with the Gospel of Matthew and what Jesus says here than the latter method I just gave you. Now, I don't know if Gino did that deliberately. I mean, he is a devout Roman Catholic from Sicily, so maybe he read the Great Commission. But his advice mirrors the advice of Jesus. We've all seen, perhaps, these memes, you had one job. Church of Jesus Christ, we really have one job. Our ultimate job is to glorify God, and the way we do it is found here in the text before us in Matthew 28. The goal of Calvary Baptist Church is to make disciples one person at a time. To treat them less of a statistic and more of a human being that is going to one of two destinations, and to treat people as all people, as a potential follower of Jesus, and for all of us who are Christ followers, to invest in people one person at a time. The command, of course, in Matthew 28, 18 through 20, by the way, the only command There are not several. There's one command wrapped around three participles. And the one command is make disciples. Or quite literally from the text, disciple. That's the command. This is rather curious that Matthew would use this. He does not use the missionary terms that are littered in the book of Acts. He does not say, for example, go and make preachers, go and make missionaries, go and make soul winners, go and make converts, go and win. He doesn't use any of that. He actually uses a lower, slower term. A term less of a penitent sinner at the altar and more of a student in the classroom. Go and make pupils. It's an academic term. Go and make students. Go and make other disciples, followers of the teacher, Jesus. So that is our commission. That's what we're to do. We are to reproduce followers of Jesus. The church is not so much in the addition business of just getting warm bodies in and treating them like statistics, but the church is in the multiplication business of reproducing followers of Jesus one after the other. So the second question then, now that we know the what, is who should make disciples? Who among us should be part of this work? Now, from time to time, I will hear people say, well, leave it to the professionals. It reminds me of a story I heard years ago of a young single gal who prayed every night, oh God, give me a good man in my life. Oh God, send me a good man. God, provide me a good man. And not that long after, a young snappy man came into her life and they began to be romantic, and about their fourth date at a beautiful restaurant, she started the evening with a prayer. She grabbed his hand and said, oh God, thank you for giving me a good man. And after the prayer, he said to her, sweetheart, I really should tell you I'm not that good. I'm on probation for Grand Theft Auto. The next date they went on, she grabbed his hand and said, oh God, thank you for providing me a hardworking professional. Sometimes I think Christians believe that the task of making disciples is reduced to the hardworking professionals. That's the pastor's job. That's the elder's job, the seminarian's job. And that would be right. It is my job to make disciples, not because I'm a pastor, but because I'm a Christian. It is not left up to every one of us, if you're a disciple, are to reproduce ourselves in the lives of others. Notice the text. Jesus is talking to whom? Verse 16. The 11 disciples. So it's a beautiful play on words. 11 disciples, go disciple. You've seen me for 3 years. Everything you've seen in me, go do, reproduce, is what Jesus is saying. Then who do I disciple? That's the third question that the text answers. And the text is quite clear, as the Great Commission tells us, to go into all the nations. Verse 19. This liberates us. John Wesley said that the world is my parish. The Abrahamic covenant is in full vigor today. That everybody you come in contact with is a potential follower of Jesus. Think about that. Instead of putting people into groups, like unbelieving culture tends to do racially or sexually or in gender, groups over here and groups over there, that actually divides people. But if you think that members of the human race have one of two destinies, and if you begin to view people as a potential follower of Jesus, it's amazing how liberate this becomes for what our mission is. That means that the lady that checks you out of the grocery store is your ministry, your exterminator. the guy who changes your oil, your waitress, the student that is sits next to you in algebra, a neighbor who likes to barbecue at night, the walker who walks by your house every day and waves. All of them, as members of the human race, are your field of harvest. And this gets back then to the principle of multiplication. Notice the 11 disciples. There's actually counted here, Matthew does. But by the time you get to Acts, those 11 have become 120. And when you get into the first 6 chapters of Acts, after Pentecost, those 120 have become thousands. They are turned loose for the gospel. D.L. Moody, arguably, led more people to Jesus Christ than anyone else in the 19th century, with perhaps the exception of Charles Spurgeon. And Moody, who did not have any formal education, he was just a shoe salesman. And he really had the talk of the street. It got him into trouble a lot. He wasn't very eloquent in the pulpit. He often was accused of crudeness. He was just a man of the people, a hardworking hustler. And finally, the religious establishment had enough, and they published an op-ed in the Chicago Times about the uncouth, uneloquent, brutal preaching of D.L. Moody. And his response was legendary. He responded by saying, "I like my bad way of doing evangelism versus your good way of not doing it." And at the end of his life, this amazing evangelist astoundingly said, "For all of my work in preaching to the lost, I would rather teach 10 people how to disciple rather than just to win 10 men and not disciple them." It's sort of like teaching someone to fish, that concept. If you take your Bibles now and turn to 2 Timothy, I would like to show that the Great Commission was not lost on the Apostle Paul, because he absolutely does the exact same thing to Timothy. Now, 2 Timothy is critical because it's the last letter that Paul writes. He's in prison. He's awaiting death. He'll die soon. It sounds like, particularly the last few chapters of Timothy, he's aware of his own mortality. Tradition says that Nero killed Peter and Paul on the same day to try to dampen the spirits of Christianity. So Paul writes his last letter to his young buckaroo, Timothy. And when he writes in 2 Timothy 2, if you look at it from a math standpoint, you see 5 generations of disciple making. Notice verse 2 of 2 Timothy 2. "And what you have heard from me in the presence of many witnesses, entrust to faithful men who will be able to teach others also." Do you see what's going on? Paul is telling Timothy, I'm passing the gospel baton to you. But I didn't get this out of nowhere. There were men, there were witnesses that came before me. Probably he has in mind of Stephen, because you cannot read the 3 conversion accounts of Paul and not see Stephen's influence on Paul. I think Stephen's martyrdom, his sermon, I think quite honestly, Paul was jealous of Stephen, because Stephen could match Paul pound for pound with his Old Testament prowess. And he could match Paul pound for pound with his morality and ethics, except he was a Christian. Paul couldn't have that. And I think there's a little of envy that Stephen had met his match, or Paul had met his match with Stephen. And you find, not at the time, but later, the influence of Stephen on Paul's conversion. So I think he has probably an eye on Stephen here and others when he says, "This gospel was entrusted into me, Timothy, and I have poured it into you my entire life. And now I'm asking you, Timothy, that you would pour it into other men and people And what does it say? And they would teach others also. And brothers and sisters, you and I are sitting here today because Timothy did that. And the disciples did just that. I like to tell people I shook hands with Charles Spurgeon. And they, of course, look at me like a cow looking at a new fence. How in the world can you shake hands with a guy that died on January 31st, 1892? The math doesn't add up. And I said, well, it's easy. Charles Spurgeon shook hands with D.L. Moody. At least eyewitness accounts. I wasn't there, but eyewitness accounts said he did. And D.L. Moody shook hands with a Bible teacher out of Chicago by the name of R.A. Torrey. And R.A. Torrey, who was born and raised in Carolina, shook hands with a traveling evangelist by the name of Mordecai Ham. And Mordecai Ham preached a tent revival meeting in which a young Billy Graham came to Christ, came forward, and shook Mordecai Ham's hand. And Billy Graham shook the hand of Al Mohler, president of Southern Seminary in Louisville, and I shook hands with Al Mohler. So I shook hands with Charles Spurgeon. But that's how discipleship works, you see. Thank God the apostles obeyed the commission, or we wouldn't be here. Thank God that the person who led you to Christ obeyed the commission, and you're here. And if given time, I guarantee every single one of you could rise to your feet because you've never forgot them. You've never forgot their influence. They are to you heroes, as they should. The biggest tree in the world is a sequoia tree named General Sherman. It stands in the eastern part of California in the Sierra Nevada mountainside at Sequoia National Park. The numbers on this tree is staggering. It stands 30 stories high. Its width span is almost 38 feet wide. In fact, it has a fence around it. The public cannot touch it. It's considered so majestic, so gigantic, so endangered that mortals cannot approach this tree. In 6 months from now, I can look out my kitchen window and I can see my neighbor's sugar maples turn colors. They're green now. But in 6 months, they will be a beautiful orange or red, depending on the year. And they're not known for their bigness. In the world of trees, they are not the egotistical, look and hear me roar, the sequoias. They are not famous for growing fat. They are famous for sending out these little helicopters that now bug us right now, right? They get into our gutters but they send these out, and they've sent out enough on the eastern United States that there are millions of maple trees. Their job is to multiply. And when you get thousands of them in full color, they can rival a sequoia in beauty. Our job is never told to get fat on doctrine or to get fat internally. Our job is to spin in the world and multiply Jesus Christ to them. And the way that we achieve that quickly is in the participles of this text. First, in going. Now, you cannot win men and women to Christ if you don't go and be with people. It is amazing how this term is Matthean. So, for example, you remember the story in Matthew 2 of the wise men. What was the exhortation? You remember the instruction. Go diligently and search for the child. Now, if the wise men didn't go, they'd never meet Jesus. And then we have the first commission of Jesus in Matthew 11. After this inquiry by John, what does Jesus say? Go back and tell John everything you've heard and seen. If the disciples didn't do that, there's no witness to John. And then, of course, in this chapter of Matthew 28, in the resurrection morn, what is the exhortation by the angels? Go quickly and tell his disciples that he is not here, he is risen. So Matthew's gospel has a going participle action line. And we are to be about people's lives and in their lives. And brothers and sisters, and I'll say more about this as we get there, still the greatest way for any church to reach people. And everything I'm getting ready to say, I'm not against special outreach because we do it. But still the greatest tried and true way is for you to go and bring people. Spurgeon, who I love, would often chide his church. In fact, there were moments he would threaten to leave. He said, go find another pastor if you don't know. I'm not Spurgeon, but he would do these things, but he didn't have to because his church rallied to his call. Spurgeon said, when asked, why are you so effective and successful at Metropolitan Tabernacle? He eventually pastored the largest church in the world. He said, because my people do two things. Number one, they pray for me. And you could show up on a Sunday and there'd be 1,000 people in prayer before the service. So my people pray for me. Number two, my people come to worship and they bring somebody with them. And he would always say that. He said, your job is to come back on Sunday and bring somebody with you. My job, he always say, is to let the fire burn. That's what he would always say, to come and watch the fire burn. That's my job. And he is really basing this exhortation on what Scripture tells us. It's what I call Operation Andrew. Where would Peter be if Andrew, his brother, didn't go get Peter and say, come, I've met the Messiah, come with me? George Barna released statistics in 2024 that confirms this. When asked the question of 100 non-churchgoers, in the last year, how many Christians invited you to church? 4 said that happened. 23 out of 100 people say that if someone did invite them, they probably wouldn't go. 73 out of 100 non-church people say they have never been invited to church in their entire life. But there is hope. Barna followed up and said that 68 out of 100 people who have never been invited to church and are non-church goers said they would go if a Christian asked them. Probably just out of respect. So, what are we waiting for? And that begs something. Can you imagine if we all made this commitment in a year from now, what our church would look like? Where would we fit people? And I am so thankful that many of you do this. I'm thankful that just this day, we have seen the results of that. Last year, my son Noah invited Matthew and had 2 others to Easter services. And Matthew has been here ever since. And today we baptized him. And today he'll join our church. And in that year, Matthew has been inviting people from Hen House, and they've been coming. And my family has been inviting other people, and they've been coming. This is how it looks like. And so many of you do this. There's nothing hard about this. We have to go. Going, baptizing, and teaching in whatever Jesus has commanded us. Brothers and sisters, over the next few months, I am committed to meeting with our elders, and they know this is coming, and presenting them a grand plan that I have been working on with some members at large for outreach and missions. But I need your help. And so on this Missions Emphasis Sunday, I wanted to give you what's next. First of all, I believe that any great work of God, particularly in the area of evangelism and missions and discipleship, which is always the front line of the church, must be preceded in prayer. So over the summer, in June and July and August, each Lord's Day, we are going to gather within our corporate service, and we are going to pray for people that you have submitted their names that are unbelievers. People that maybe you already have a relationship with, that you want to see come to Christ, neighbors, friends, relatives, it doesn't matter. And we will put together a master list. You can send that to me, you can send that to Morgan at our Calvary Baptist Church email address, and you could say, I want this person on our master list. You can start doing that this week. We'll compile that list, we'll add to it, and every Sunday throughout the summer, June, July, and August, as a people of God, we will, at some point in our corporate worship service, pray for these people. Along that, Pastor Daniel and I are praying about and putting together a discipleship training track that will be available to you this summer. What that is, as Pastor Daniel works through it, is for anybody in this room who wants to know, okay, how do I one-on-one share the gospel and disciple someone in Christianity? How do I do it? That will be training ground for you. Pastor Daniel's constructing that now and will lead it. So if you're interested in just getting in on this workshop on, okay, I know I should disciple, but I don't know how to do it. He'll give you the practical tools, here's some strategies, and that will be throughout this summer. Also throughout this summer, I will be working with some of you, members of the congregation, and any of you that are interested that would like to brainstorm on practical ideas for our church in outreach ministries, both to visitors, in evangelism and mission. This is basically a think tank of ideas. I am an idea guy that likes to pivot toward ideas to doing it. And so if you have ideas and you want to get in on this think tank, we'll just take the summer and then we'll stop. About where we're at now as a church and where we would like to be in the purpose of reaching out to those who are not here. Visitors, unbelievers, across the oceans. Then you can talk to me about getting on that. I'm already assembling it, but if you're here and that excites you and you've got ideas, it can be done via email, it can be done just with group sessions, you let me know. And then this fall, we're going to unleash, after we've prayed and had ideas, we're going to unleash a corporate body life ministry on what we can do now to evangelize and go out and reach visitors and the lost of Lenexa and beyond. And these are practical ways that every single one of us can do as a church. This is where we're headed. This is where we must head. We have the gospel, so let's unleash it to the world. One of my favorite stories involves Zach Hampel. He is a young man who wrote a best-selling book. It became the number one New York Times book for a while, called How to Snag Major League Baseballs. He was a 23-year-old kid from New York, and he spent 10 years going to major league ballparks and caught in those 10 years nearly 1,700 baseballs from major league games. At the time of his publication, he had a streak going of the last 264 games catching at least one ball. He averaged 6 balls a game. Now think about that. In just a few hours, he caught 6 balls of what all of us would spend a lifetime never being able to catch. So how did he do it? Well, he explains in his book, use your head, be in the right place at the right time. Which is good advice for Great Commission people. Be in the right place at the right time. Go, baptize, teach, make disciples, get around people. He knows when every major league ballpark opens for batting practice. So he is the first in line when they open for batting practice, which gives him a good advantage. He memorizes where certain hitters are likely to foul off pitches. And so when they get up, he goes to that position in the stadium, judging on the statistics of how many foul balls went to this area. Zach also says it's highly important that you sit next to certain people. He advises a young family of little kids fascinated by the Jumbotron and aren't paying attention, and very, very old people who have slow reaction times. He knows his audience. Brothers and sisters, the world is ripe for the taking for the gospel, but it's to be done one person at a time, where we pour ourselves into that person and invest. It's tough work. Sometimes it's heartbreaking work. But this is the stuff that Jesus changed the world. Imagine these riffraff of 11 people. I mean, sectarian, arrogant, bigoted people, as we'll learn in Matthew. But later in Acts, Dr. Luke says they changed the world. They turned the world upside down. Now, in just a few moments, when we get ready to benedict, after we take the Lord's Supper and after we present two people for membership, I'm going to ask all of us, if you just have a few minutes to make your way to the fellowship hall. All of the flags of the world will have tables. Everybody from those countries will represent them. Some of it will be like Costco meets Calvary, right? Little food. You'll have food from those nations. You'll be able to talk about those nations. You'll be able to get strategies of those nations, the opportunities that they have for the gospel, the challenges that you can pray for. This will take 20 minutes at the most of your time. You can just go through and stay as long as you want, but it's not that big of an effort. So there's about 6 tables. You can just go through fair style. And that will be on display of what we have available already in our church with our people groups to change the world. Let's pray together. Father, I am so thankful for this assembly. I'm thankful that once upon a time you gave me parents that invested the gospel, and then my first grade teacher, Brenda Swafford, who led me to Jesus. God, time is so short. Help us to get rid of the distractions of busyness and stuff that knock us off the road, to pouring ourselves into people for the gospel's sake. Lead us and guide us as we continue to worship you, Jesus, our only hope. This we pray in his name and for his sake. Amen.